Please don't kick me. I'm very hurt, cried Rose as she crouched behind the kitchen door of Miller's Café. She thought she was invisible, until Eleanor Whitmore, a quiet customer with a secret worth billions, stood up. What happened next would change both their lives forever. If you believe cruelty to workers should never be ignored, hit subscribe right now and tell me where in the world you're watching from. The only people who scroll past are the ones who stay silent when others are suffering. Now, if you've done that, I have just one question for you. If you see injustice unfolding right in front of you, would you walk away, or would you take the risk to stop it? Have you done it before? Have you stood up for someone helpless before? Well, if you haven't, keep that question in mind as you listen to what happened inside Miller's Café. Today's story might make you think twice the next time it happens. Now, let's get back to the story. Rose pressed her hand against her 6-month pregnant belly, steadying her breathing against the sharp pain radiating through her side. Moments before, Martins had deliberately shoved his chair backward into her, nearly knocking her off balance while laughing about clumsy help. Like this video, if you'd never stay silent watching someone like Martins humiliate a pregnant woman. For God's sake, she was pregnant and harmless. I know the heartless will look away, but the brave will hit like. The physical ache was nothing. It was the terror that consumed her. Terror of losing this baby the way she'd lost the last one from stress. Terror of losing her job and being unable to afford prenatal care. Terror of remaining invisible in her suffering. Just another statistic. Another struggling young black woman the world had decided didn't matter. At 25, pregnant and alone, Rose had already learned that survival meant enduring what others might break under. Her boyfriend had disappeared the moment she'd told him about the pregnancy. Her family was states away, struggling with their own battles. The factory where she'd worked for 6 years had closed 3 months into her pregnancy. Miller's Café was her lifeline, not because it paid well, but because it was the only lifeline left. The pay barely covered her studio apartment and the mounting medical bills from her previous miscarriage that still haunted her credit report. She didn't know that in the corner booth, a woman with silver hair and observant eyes had witnessed everything. Eleanor Whitmore, dressed in a simple cardigan and sensible shoes, looked like any other retiree enjoying a quiet afternoon with chamomile tea and homemade soup. But the way her jaw had tightened, the way her hands gripped the teacup with barely contained emotion, told a different story. This woman, worth billions through her son's technology empire and decades of her own strategic investments, had built her entire life on a single, unwavering principle. Power means nothing if you don't use it to protect those who have none. Rose had been working at Miller's Café for 7 months, ever since the factory closure had left her with no other options. The work was honest, if underpaid. Most customers were kind. Elderly regulars who'd become like family, working-class families grateful for a warm meal and a genuine smile, tired professionals who appreciated a server who actually listened to their preferences. Rose had built a reputation for remembering orders, checking on customers like Mrs. Patterson, who'd lost her husband, using her lunch breaks to help Miguel, the dishwasher, with his English lessons. She treated everyone with dignity, even when her own dignity felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. But lately, there have been more difficult customers, people who seemed to take pleasure in reminding her of her place. Eleanor had started coming to Miller's Café 4 weeks ago, following the same quiet routine. Chamomile tea, a bowl of homemade soup, never ordering anything complicated or demanding. She dressed simply, drove an older sedan, and spoke softly when she placed her order. Rose had pegged her as a retired schoolteacher or nurse, someone from the working world who understood the value of small kindnesses. Eleanor always said please and thank you. She always left a modest tip, but never made a show of it. She seemed to exist in the cafe the way she might exist in her own home, peacefully present, observing, never demanding attention. What Rose didn't know was that Eleanor Whitmore wasn't retired at all. She was, in fact, the architect of the Whitmore Foundation's $500 million initiative to support struggling mothers and workers across the country. For the past 4 weeks, Eleanor had been conducting a personal mission, vetting establishments to determine which ones had an authentic community heart. She wasn't looking at balance sheets or profit margins. She came to feel a home, to see how people treated each other when they thought no one was watching to find the leaders who were already leading without knowing it, the ones who understood dignity not as a privilege for the privileged, but as a birthright for everyone. She'd evaluated 12 establishments. 12. None of them had felt right, until Miller's Café. The customer who'd made Rose's life miserable for the past 5 weeks was a regular named Martins, a 35-year-old middle manager with an expensive watch and the demeanor of someone who'd been told his entire life that the world owed him something. Eleanor had watched him escalate his cruelty with the methodical precision of someone testing boundaries. The deliberately spilled coffee. The snide comments about Rose's pregnancy. Shouldn't you be on welfare? At least then you'd be honest about your situation. The complicated orders with fake modifications, followed by accusations that Rose had gotten it wrong. The exact change left on the table, no tip, after making her clean up messes he'd deliberately created. The other staff were intimidated by him. Carl, the cafe manager, pretended not to notice, fearing that keeping him silent. Most customers exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing. Eleanor noticed everything. As Eleanor watched Martins lean back in his chair with that familiar smug expression, she made a decision that would ripple far beyond Miller's Café. For 4 weeks she'd gathered evidence. For 4 weeks she'd watched Rose maintain grace under impossible circumstances. Now, as Rose approached Martin's table with fresh coffee and trembling hands, Eleanor Whitmore, Billionaire's mother, foundation architect, and the woman who had learned long ago that silence makes you complicit, stood up. And everything changed. As Eleanor watched Martins lean back in his chair with that familiar smug expression, she made a decision that would ripple far beyond Miller's Café. For 4 weeks, she'd gathered evidence. For 4 weeks, she'd watched Rose maintain grace under impossible circumstances. Now, as Rose approached Martin's table with fresh coffee and trembling hands, Eleanor Whitmore, Billionaire's mother, foundation architect, and the woman who had learned long ago that silence makes you complicit, stood up. And everything changed. "This coffee is cold," Martins announced loudly, before Rose had even finished pouring. "I specifically asked for hot coffee. Are you trying to ruin my day?" Rose's shoulders tensed. The coffee was fresh, steam still rising from the pot, but she knew better than to argue. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll get you a fresh cup right away." She turned toward the kitchen, but Martins wasn't finished. "Actually, you know what? Bring it back here, pour it again. I want to watch you do it right this time." He gestured to his cup with dismissive arrogance. "Maybe if you took better care of yourself instead of worrying about that baby, you'd actually have the focus to do your job properly." The cafe went quiet. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly widow who came every Tuesday, exchanged a look with the construction worker at the next table. Carl, behind the counter, suddenly became very interested in the espresso machine. A young couple in the far booth shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Eleanor's hands gripped the edge of her table. She'd seen this pattern before, not just here at Miller's Café, but in workplaces across the country during her years in business. Cruelty thrived in silence. It grew fat and comfortable when decent people looked away. A flash of memory hit her. Herself, 30 years younger, 6 months pregnant, standing in front of a corporate boardroom full of men who looked at her swollen belly with barely concealed contempt. One of them had said something similar, that pregnancy was a distraction, that she clearly couldn't handle her responsibilities. She'd stood there trembling, invisible in her humiliation. If not for her mother, fierce, uncompromising, willing to fight when Eleanor couldn't fight for herself, she would have believed them. Her mother's voice echoed across the decades. Silence in the face of cruelty makes you complicit. Eleanor pulled out her phone, pretending to check messages. But her camera was already recording. Dates, times, every cruel word, every deliberate humiliation. She'd been documenting this for weeks, building a record that would mean something when the moment came. Because Eleanor had learned long ago that power wasn't just about what you could do in an instant. It was about what you could prove over time. Rose returned with a fresh pot, her movements careful and deliberate, one hand always protecting her belly. As she bent to pour, Martin suddenly shifted in his chair. "Oh, you spilled something under here," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Better clean it up before someone slips." There was nothing under the table. Rose knew it. Eleanor saw it. The construction worker saw it. But Rose bent down anyway, balancing her serving tray, trying to protect her baby, trying to keep this job she desperately needed. That's when Martin's foot came up. Not accidentally. The movement was too deliberate, too calculated. His briefcase flew into her path. Rose lost her balance. The tray tilted. Dishes crashed. Water splashed everywhere. Rose cried out as she fell, her arms instinctively wrapping around her belly to protect her baby, the same protective reflex she'd developed after losing the last one. She hit the floor hard. Maybe welfare mothers shouldn't take jobs from people who actually deserve them, Martins laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. At least then, you wouldn't embarrass yourself like this. The cafe froze. Eleanor was already moving before the last dish stopped clattering. She moved with a deliberation that made every eye in the room follow her. This wasn't the modest grandmother in the cardigan anymore. This was a woman who had commanded respect in rooms full of powerful men. This was Eleanor Whitmore in her full authority. She helped Rose to her feet with surprising strength, one hand supporting her back, the other checking carefully for injuries. "Are you all right? Is the baby okay?" Rose nodded, shaking, tears streaming down her face. "I'm fine. I'm okay. It was just an accident." "No," Eleanor said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of decades. "It wasn't." She turned to face Martins, and the shift was absolute. The air in the cafe seemed to change temperature. "You just assaulted a pregnant woman," Eleanor said, each word precise and deliberate. "And I've watched you build to this exact moment for 4 weeks. The deliberately spilled drinks, the snide comments, the spilled messes you created on purpose, the harassment about her pregnancy, every single cruel word, every deliberate humiliation. I've documented everything." She pulled out her phone, showing him the screen. Dates, times, audio recordings, photos. A complete record of your pattern of behavior. Martin's smug certainty flickered. "Who do you think you are? Just another old woman sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. You can't prove." "I'm someone who knows exactly what you are," Eleanor interrupted, her voice cutting through his bravado like steel. "You're a coward who mistakes cruelty for power, and I'm someone who spent the last 4 weeks making sure that ends today." She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need to report an assault," she said clearly, her eyes never leaving Martin's face. "A pregnant woman was deliberately tripped by a customer at Miller's Café on 5th Street. I have documentation, I have witnesses, and I need an ambulance as well." The cafe erupted. Other customers who had been silent for weeks suddenly found their voices. The construction worker stood up. Mrs. Patterson was already moving toward Rose, her hand on the young woman's arm. "I saw the whole thing," the construction worker said firmly. "He did it on purpose, deliberately kicked his briefcase into her path." "I've seen him do this before," Mrs. Patterson added, her voice shaking with anger. "Week after week I've watched him treat this sweet girl like she was nothing, and we all just sat here. God forgive us, we just sat here." Carl finally stepped out from behind the counter, his face flushed with shame and belated courage. I didn't realize." "Your ignorance was a choice," Eleanor said quietly, not unkindly. But the words landed like a judgment. "We'll discuss what comes next later." Martins tried to move toward the door, but Eleanor positioned herself in his path. "You'll wait for the police," she said simply. The sirens arrived within minutes. Paramedics rushed in, immediately checking Rose and the baby. Eleanor stayed close, one hand on Rose's shoulder. "The baby's heartbeat is strong. one of the paramedics said. But we should take you to the hospital for monitoring, especially with your pregnancy history. Any trauma can be serious. I'm going with her, Eleanor said, not a question, but a statement. The police arrived, taking statements. Martin's face had gone pale as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. His carefully constructed world, his job, his reputation, his sense of untouchability, was crumbling in real time. Comment, justice matters. If you believe bullies like Martin's deserve consequences. Let's fill this comment section with voices that don't tolerate cruelty. As they loaded Rose into the ambulance, Eleanor climbed in beside her. She took the young woman's trembling hand. You're not alone anymore, Eleanor whispered. I promise you that. Rose looked at her with confusion and gratitude mixed together. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Eleanor squeezed her hand gently. You'll understand soon enough. Right now, you just need to know that what happened today wasn't your fault, and it's going to change everything. As the ambulance pulled away from Miller's Café, Martins stood on the sidewalk watching, his smug certainty beginning to crack. He had no idea that the woman he'd just seen was about to dismantle his entire carefully constructed life. He had no idea who he'd just made an enemy of. The hospital examination room was sterile and cold, but Eleanor's presence made it feel less lonely. She'd stayed through every test, every worried glance from the medical staff, every moment Rose held her breath waiting for news about the baby. Now, as the doctor delivered the verdict, Eleanor reached over and squeezed Rose's hand. The baby's fine, the doctor said with a reassuring smile. Strong heartbeat, normal movements, no signs of distress. But Rose, I want you on bed rest for the next 48 hours, minimum. Your body's been through trauma, and stress isn't good for your pregnancy. Complete rest, reduced stress. We'll schedule a follow-up ultrasound in 1 week just to be thorough. Rose nodded, relief washing over her face, immediately replaced by panic. How long can I take off work? I can't afford. Don't worry about that right now, Eleanor said quietly. Let me handle the logistics. While Rose was moved to a recovery room, Eleanor stepped into the hallway and made a series of phone calls. First to Miller's Café's owner, establishing that Rose's job was secure. Then to a medical billing specialist, ensuring that every hospital charge would be absorbed. Then to her own team at the foundation, setting wheels in motion for what was coming next. By the time she returned to Rose's side, the young woman was already dozing fitfully, her hand still resting protectively over her belly. Eleanor sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside the hospital bed and waited. 4 hours later, after the hospital had cleared Rose for discharge and given her a sheaf of instructions about rest and follow-up care, Eleanor found them a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria. She ordered chamomile tea for herself and helped Rose settle into a chair with a bottle of water and some crackers. Thank you, Rose whispered, her voice still shaky. For staying. For everything. I don't understand why you're doing this. You don't even know me. Eleanor smiled gently, wrapping her hands around the warm tea. Oh, but I do know you, Rose. I know you better than you might think. I've been watching you for 4 weeks. Rose's eyes widened. What do you mean, watching me? Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a simple business card. She handed it across the table. Rose read it twice. 3 times. Her hands began to shake. Eleanor Whitmore, Senior Advisor, the Whitmore Foundation. You're... Rose's voice trailed off. The Whitmore name. That's the billionaire tech family. James Whitmore's company. You're... His mother, yes, Eleanor confirmed. But that's only part of the story. For the past 2 months, I've been personally vetting establishments across the country. Places the foundation is considering supporting. I don't just look at balance sheets and profit margins, Rose. I come in person. I watch how people treat each other when they think no one as important is watching. Rose stared at the card as if it might disappear. But you seemed so... ordinary. The cardigan, the tea, the modest tips. You looked like someone's grandmother. That's exactly the point, Eleanor said. a knowing smile playing at her lips. I needed to see the truth of a place, and I needed to see who you really are when you don't know you're being observed. I still don't understand, Rose whispered. Eleanor set down her tea and leaned forward. 30 years ago I was you, Rose. I was 25 years old, 6 months pregnant, and terrified. My boyfriend had left. My family couldn't help. I was working 2 jobs and barely surviving. People looked at me the way that man looked at you today, like I was less than human. Like my pregnancy was an inconvenience, something I should have hidden away. Rose's eyes filled with tears as she listened. I stood in boardrooms where men made comments about my body, my abilities, my worth, Eleanor continued, her voice steady but thick with emotion. I felt invisible and powerless, but I had one thing you didn't have. I had my mother. She fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. She gave me resources. She gave me recognition. She believed in me before I believed in myself. And that intervention changed everything. Eleanor paused, taking a sip of her tea. My mother passed away 5 years ago. Before she died, she made me promise something. She said, Eleanor, you've been given so much. You have power and resources. Don't waste them. Be the presence for other women that I was for you. Be the one who fights when others stay silent. She looked directly at Rose. That promise is why the Whitmore Foundation exists. We have $500 million dedicated to supporting struggling mothers and workers. My role is to find authentic places with real heart, with people who understand that dignity isn't a luxury. I've evaluated 12 establishments. None of them felt right. Until Miller's Café, Rose said softly. Until Miller's Café, Eleanor confirmed, but not because of the building or the menu, because of you. I watched you work for 4 weeks, Rose. I watched you remember how people like their coffee. I watched you check on Mrs. Patterson, making sure she was okay after losing her husband. I watched you use your lunch breaks to teach Miguel English. I watched you treat difficult customers with grace, even when they didn't deserve it. Rose was crying now, tears streaming down her face. The way other staff members look to you for guidance, even though you're younger than most of them. The way you maintain your dignity, even when the world is trying to strip it away. You're not a victim, Rose, you're a leader. You're someone who understands what it means to build community and uplift people. You just need resources and recognition. Eleanor reached across the table and took both of Rose's hands. I want to make you an offer. The Whitmore Foundation is going to acquire Miller's Café. We're going to completely renovate it, and I want you to be the operations director. Rose shook her head, unable to process the words. I can't. I don't have a degree. I've never managed anything. What if I fail? Then you fail, Eleanor said simply, and we learn and adjust. But Rose, I've spent 30 years in business. I've managed large corporations and complex operations, and I'm telling you with absolute certainty, I know leadership when I see it, and I see it in you. She outlined the details. Living wage, full healthcare coverage, on-site childcare, flexible scheduling, paid maternity leave, with a gradual return to work, educational funding for an online business management degree, and eventually the opportunity to manage other locations in the network. This isn't charity, Eleanor emphasized. This is an investment. I'm investing in what I've already seen in you. Rose was overwhelmed, caught between disbelief and desperate hope. What about Martin's? What's going to happen to him? Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. That's already being handled. I conducted some research. Martin's is a middle manager at a company that does significant business with Whitmore Industries. And it turns out his behavior at Miller's Café is part of a much larger pattern. There have been harassment complaints filed at his workplace. Multiple complaints. His bosses have ignored them. She pulled out her phone and showed Rose documentation. I've shared everything I've gathered with his company's board. 2 of the board members are trustees of the Whitmore Foundation. They take these matters very seriously. Justice will be served, Rose. You don't need to worry about the details. But understand this. Actions have consequences. especially for those who think they're untouchable. Rose felt something shift inside her. Not satisfaction, but relief. Not vengeance, but justice. "You won't do this alone," Eleanor promised, squeezing her hands. "From this moment forward, you have me. You have the foundation. You have resources and support. But most importantly, you have someone who believes in you. Completely." They sat in that hospital cafeteria, two women separated by decades but connected by understanding, making plans for the future. Later that evening, Eleanor drove Rose home to her modest studio apartment. As they walked up the narrow stairs, Rose felt a flutter of embarrassment at the threadbare carpet, the faded paint. But Eleanor's eyes took in everything with respect, not judgment. She saw the careful way Rose had maintained the space despite her poverty. She saw the sonogram photos on the fridge. Rose's baby captured in black and white, a future waiting to be born. She saw the small corner where Rose was preparing a nursery with second-hand items, each piece arranged with love and hope. As Eleanor helped Rose settle onto the bed, making sure she had pillows supporting her back and legs for the prescribed rest, she felt the familiar fire kindle inside her chest. The fire that had driven her for 5 years. This was exactly why the foundation existed. This struggle, this dignity in the face of impossible odds. This young woman refusing to break. And Rose was exactly who they'd been looking for. 2 weeks into her prescribed bed rest, Rose's apartment had transformed into an unlikely design studio. Fabric swatches covered her bedside table. Paint samples in shades of warm cream, soft sage, and gentle coral lined the windowsill. Eleanor visited every other day, always with new ideas, always with one crucial question. "What do you think, Rose?" The acquisition of Miller's Café had been finalized with surprising speed. Carl, the manager who'd finally found his courage, had been offered an ownership stake and the position of head cook, a decision that made him weep with gratitude. But the real transformation was happening in Rose's mind as she pored over architectural plans and renovation timelines. "I want it to feel safe," Rose had told Eleanor during one of their planning sessions. "Not sterile, not corporate, safe. Like a place where women know they can be themselves without judgment." Eleanor had listened intently, taking notes, asking follow-up questions. And with each conversation, Rose's confidence grew. Her ideas weren't just acknowledged, they were valued. They were implemented. Her vision was becoming reality. The news about Martin's arrived through a former co-worker who'd run into Rose at the grocery store. "Did you hear?" the woman whispered excitedly. "He got fired. Apparently there was some big investigation at his company. Multiple complaints about harassment going back years. The board did a full audit and just let him go. No severance, nothing." Rose felt a strange mixture of emotions. Not satisfaction. She'd learned that revenge was a poison that hurt the person drinking it more than anyone else. But relief? Yes. Relief that he couldn't hurt anyone else at Miller's Café. Relief that there were consequences for cruelty. When she mentioned it to Eleanor during their next meeting, the older woman simply nodded. "He attempted to sue for wrongful termination," Eleanor said calmly. "The case was dismissed. His reputation in the industry is destroyed. He's relocated to another state. He won't be bothering anyone here again." Rose didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. She simply understood that Eleanor had handled it with the same methodical precision she brought to everything. "How do you feel about it?" Eleanor asked gently. Rose thought for a long moment. "I feel like I can finally breathe," she said. "Not because he's suffering, but because it's over. Because the world saw what he did, and the world said it wasn't acceptable." Eleanor smiled. "That's wisdom, Rose. Never forget that." The name for the renovated café came to Rose in the middle of the night. She called Eleanor first thing in the morning. "Rose's Haven," she said, her voice trembling with the rightness of it. "I want to call it Rose's Haven." Eleanor's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Perfect. It's exactly right." Together, they developed the mission statement, which Rose insisted on keeping simple and clear. Every woman deserves dignity, support, and opportunity. The benefits package was comprehensive in ways Rose had never imagined possible. Living wages, genuinely livable, not minimum wage. Full healthcare coverage for all employees and their children. On-site childcare so mothers could work without the constant anxiety of leaving their babies. Flexible scheduling that honored the reality of women's lives. Educational partnerships with the local community college. And a mentorship program where experienced mothers would support newer mothers navigating work and parenthood. Eleanor brought business books to Rose's bedside. Leadership, community building, the art of seeing people. Rose read them voraciously during her bed rest, her instincts validated by business principles she'd never formally learned. Her ideas kept flowing. A local artist displays a wall where struggling artists can showcase their work. A job posting board for the community. A meal assistance program where customers could buy meals for those in need. And the Dignity Wall, a place to celebrate and honor the women who came through the program. "This is what community looks like," Eleanor said, reading Rose's notes. "You understand something that takes most people years to learn in business school." As the weeks passed, something shifted between them. They were no longer advisor and recipient. They were becoming friends. Eleanor shared stories of her mother, the fierce woman who'd fought for her, whose memory Eleanor carried like a torch. Rose talked about her dreams for Maya, about the kind of world she wanted her daughter to grow up in. "My mother used to say," Eleanor reflected during one evening visit, "that the most powerful thing we can do is see each other, really see each other. Not the surface, not the circumstances, but the soul underneath." "Your mother sounds like she was remarkable," Rose said. "She was," Eleanor agreed. "And now I'm watching you become remarkable too." 3 months later, Maya Grace James entered the world on a Thursday morning, healthy and perfect and screaming with the lungs of someone who planned to be heard. Eleanor was there, in the hospital room, serving as the grandmother Rose's own family couldn't be. And when Eleanor's 3 actual grandchildren came to meet their Aunt Rose's baby, something profound happened. They didn't see a single mother. They saw family. Rose held her daughter and understood finally what it meant to belong to something larger than circumstance. This was family, chosen, supportive, and genuine. This was what Eleanor had been building all along. 2 weeks postpartum, as Rose prepared to transition from recovery to her new role, she felt ready. Not because the pain was gone, but because she had support, because she had been seen and believed in. 6 months after that terrible day at Miller's Café, Rose stood in the completely transformed dining room of Rose's Haven. The harsh fluorescent lights had been replaced with warm, welcoming fixtures that cast a golden glow across the space. The vinyl booths were gone, replaced with comfortable seating arranged to encourage conversation. Local artist work covered the walls, landscapes, portraits, abstracts, creating a gallery that celebrated community creativity. The staff of 7 moved with practiced grace. 4 other single mothers, a retired teacher working part-time to stay active. 2 teenagers are saving for college. Miguel, the dishwasher from Miller's Café days, had been promoted to assistant kitchen manager, his English now fluent, his confidence transformed. Behind the counter, in a beautiful bassinet decorated with soft fabrics, Maya slept peacefully. On-site childcare meant Rose could work and mother simultaneously, not perfectly, but with dignity. The Dignity Wall was the heart of the space. 47 photos and stories of women who'd come through the program, stories of transformation, stories of hope realized. And there, positioned prominently, was a photograph Eleanor had provided, a young, pregnant Eleanor, fierce and determined, taken by her mother 3 decades ago. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Every woman deserves someone who sees her worth. Be that someone." The opening day had brought an overwhelming community response. Former Miller's Café regulars came, tears in their eyes, amazed at the transformation. Local business leaders attended, learning about the foundation's mission. News cameras captured Rose in professional attire, managing operations with quiet confidence, speaking about dignity and opportunity, and the power of being seen. In her brief remarks, Rose had thanked Eleanor, honored all struggling mothers, and made a promise. Rose's Haven exists to show you that you are not invisible. Your struggles matter. Your dreams matter. You matter. Later that evening, during a quiet moment in the empty cafe, Eleanor and Rose sat together in the corner booth, Eleanor's booth, the place where everything had changed. 3 other locations already have preliminary interest, Eleanor shared. Communities nearby, all seeking leaders like you, people with heart, with lived experience of struggle, with natural dignity. Rose was already halfway through her online business degree. Eleanor's vision was crystallizing into something real. Rose eventually overseeing an entire network of Rose's Havens, each one a beacon of dignity for struggling mothers. As the evening deepened, they sat with chamomile tea between them, Eleanor's signature drink, now also Rose's. "Thinking about how far you've come?" Eleanor asked gently. "Thinking about how one person's courage to act can change everything," Rose replied, watching Maya sleep in her bassinet, watching the transformed space around them. Eleanor smiled and shook her head slightly. "Not quite, my dear. I simply gave you the tools. You were always strong enough. You just needed someone to believe it first." Rose understood now. The strength had always been there, in her grace under impossible circumstances, in her instinct to care for others, in her refusal to let the world's cruelty define her. Eleanor hadn't rescued her. Eleanor had simply provided resources and recognition for the leader Rose already was. "There's a woman coming in for an interview tomorrow," Rose said. "Single mother, pregnant, working 3 jobs. Carl mentioned her." Eleanor's eyes lit up. "Another beginning." "Another beginning," Rose agreed. Later, as Rose locked up Rose's Haven for the night, she felt the weight of the keys to 3 cafe locations in her pocket. 3 locations, 3 communities, 3 networks of support are still being built. Eleanor's car waited at the curb, ready to drive her home. Through the window, the Dignity wall glowed in the soft lighting. 47 women's stories, their photographs a testament to transformation. And there, prominent and purposeful, the image of young, pregnant Eleanor with the plaque beneath. Every woman deserves someone who sees her worth. Be that someone. Rose thought about that terrifying moment 6 months ago when she'd lain on the cafe floor, convinced she was alone, convinced she was powerless. She'd thought invisibility was her fate. She hadn't known that being seen by the right person at the right moment would change not just her life, but the lives of countless women who would walk through these doors after her. Martins had relocated to another state. His career stalled, his reputation damaged beyond repair. Rose had learned through acquaintances that he was struggling to find work, struggling to rebuild. But she no longer felt anger toward him. She'd learned what Eleanor had tried to teach her. The best revenge is building something so beautiful that cruelty becomes irrelevant. We don't defeat darkness by fighting it. We defeat it by creating so much light. As Rose climbed into Eleanor's car, she held Maya close, feeling the weight of her daughter's sleeping form. Real, present, safe. Her final thought, as they drove through the quiet streets toward home, being seen changed my life. Now I'll spend my life seeing others. If you've experienced a moment when a stranger's intervention changed everything, share your story in the comments. We want to hear from you. Subscribe if you'd rather build light than spread darkness. Only the cruel stay quiet. The kind hit subscribe, like, and share to stand for dignity. Remember, every woman deserves to be seen, valued, and supported, especially when she's at her most vulnerable. And sometimes, being that person who sees someone else is the most powerful thing you can do.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.